Welcome back to Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher. With me today, with me always, is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thanks so much for joining me today, my friend.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being with me.
Yeah, of course. Folks, sorry we missed you last week. If you were like, hey, where were you? We appreciate you missing
Mhm.
us. But we were experiencing some time zone changes, a little under the weather on so we're back. We're back with your regularly scheduled programming. So we appreciate you yeah, sticking with us. Today I'm really interested in this topic. Adam and I were talking about it before we hopped on. And just the fact that with everything going on in the world, people are saying World War III just started, Epstein files, all this craziness in the news. And I know you're like, ugh, like, you don't even want to hear it. I totally understand. And you might feel some sort of animosity towards the human race in general, right? And we come here today to deny that or, disagree with that thesis about humanity. Adam and I don't think humans are inherently evil. I think we're probably largely traumatized, right? And
Mhm.
that lends to more patterns of behavior that create violence, that create destruction, death, right? Unnecessary death across the planet. But, and I believe this too, I don't think kids come into this world with, evil or the intent to destroy, or, I mean, you might see a toddler and you say, man, I disagree. My 2 year old, in my living room, destroyed it. But I
Mhm.
think you understand what I'm trying to say, right? Like we don't grow up to want to destroy, right? A lot of us, Hitler wanted to be an artist, y'all. You know what I mean? I know that's like a crazy example, but before he went on his crazy path of destruction, he just wanted to be an artist, and
Yeah.
that's an example that comes to mind, of we want to create, we want to, indulge in those things, our creative energies, build things, right? Come together in community, love, right? I think that's mainly the core of humanity. We're just guided into these things, or we're led to believe that, destruction or violence, we have to conquer those people, otherwise they'll hurt us. You know, there's this programming that we've been susceptible towards for, a large part of human history. And when it comes to religion or cultural programming, these things that are, again, just programmed into our brains from a young age, it kind of lends to itself, right? Children are very programmable, especially young children. You see child soldiers in Africa, or again, to bring up the German
Mhm.
example in 1930s, Hitler Youth, right? Where using, programming the children to become, these weapons, right? These people that are capable of violence, because children are very susceptible to that programming, good or bad, right? And so, yeah, Adam, that's kind of my little opening spiel for today. Just that we're not born with all these, these evil tendencies that we're seeing across the globe. They're learned behaviors. People bring up the example of nurture versus nature.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of bad nurturing, around the globe. And yeah, man, what do you think about that? This opening topic. It's a heavy one, deep one, but also a beautiful one, right? Like we're not what you might see around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you said, children are programmable, and I think that's what we become programmed into creating our own realities, right? And when we're programmed with fear, that's what we end up projecting outwardly, and then that becomes our experience, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But understanding that, yeah, one of the earliest programs, one of the earliest distortions, and one of the ones that most profoundly affects Western thought is the one that comes through the distorted version of Christianity, which is original sin, that humans are separate from God, are inherently bad, and need to work to get back toward to create a relationship with God. And it was interesting, actually. Just we didn't even talk about this before, but you sent me that talk on Jnana Yoga, right? Just like the path of knowledge, which states, well, I mean, to put it very simply, like, just to get to the place of knowledge, to recognize that there is no separation. So the knowledge doing away with the ignorance of believing in separation, believing in the illusion, and getting to the place of awareness that we already are there. We are one with God. We're one with each other. We don't have to do anything. We are born inherently pure and good. We live in this free will dimension where it happens to be, a fear paradigm, because this is the creation from our, distorted free will choices, which grows out of the original distortion that we are separate, and creates this fear-based paradigm. But it's not real, and just because that has been our experience for a long time, it doesn't mean that it's real. It might be normal because it's relatively normal, but doesn't mean it's natural. And I think it's an important thing to remember as we move forward, because I mean, I would have to assume, shouldn't make assumptions, but I'm making one here, that there might be a little bit of disillusionment, which is a good thing in many ways, but coming out of the general populace becoming more aware of things like the Epstein files and how it's a lot darker than most people realize, and how it's probably even darker than we realize. And that's probably gonna create some widespread disillusionment, some hopelessness, maybe some anchoring in that belief that maybe we're just fucked, and like humans are inherently evil, disgusting beings, and we should give up on ourselves and each other. It would be understandable for people to, for at least a while, reach those conclusions when looking from that separated, uh, that illusion of separation perspective, that fear based, that fear based mindset. So yeah, it's important to recognize that that's not the truth. That's just an aspect of the distortion that we have been living under. And yeah, man, there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah. And you touched upon this before we hopped on, which I thought was really interesting. But it seems like, yeah, like there's a darkness in the upper echelons of human society that has been guiding us into more darkness, it seems like, for a long time now. And I always point back to history, right? Like it's like it seems really dark right now, but it's like imagine living through the plague, imagine living through World War I, World War II, any of these dramatic moments in history, any of the falls of the fall of Rome, or in China during the Japanese occupation in World War II, like that must have been insane, the rape of Nanking. And like any of those moments, like it probably felt like the world was ending, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm not saying
And
that that's
why
okay.
wouldn't it?
Well, why wouldn't it, right? But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying that's okay, but I'm just saying that it's like it's probably always felt like that for humans, right? To come to the human experience. And maybe that's the point, right? Like this is, we say like, we come here to learn. If we come from unconditional infinite love, we come here and there's that absence of that, there's room to learn without that guarantee given of unconditional love from which we think we come, right? And so, yeah, man, it's like, it seems like there's this battle going on between the inherent, which, again, the good nature of humanity, and it just gets, rewritten as we come into here from the forces that are in control of, the populations. And I think that's the fight, y'all. Like that's like kind of like part of the point of us being here is, Adam and I talk about elevating the consciousness of humanity and how we're probably still in our infancy in terms of consciousness, where we recognize it's not okay to kill people. Violence is not the answer. There's more than enough resources to go around and to live in harmony with the planet. And, we say that and, people think we're crazy or, that's unrealistic. And it's like, that's not the case at all.
Mm,
Resources are just hoarded. We
mhm.
could live in harmony with the planet, but when profit and money, again, a fake thing, are the thing that is guiding every decision on this planet, not harmony with the earth, not, the safety and well-being of its people or the animals that are, that we should be caretakers of, not destroyers of. Even if we're, eating them, right? There's ways to live in harmony with the environment. Hunters will tell you that, right? Growing up in New England, where hunters would go shoot a deer, and that deer will feed them for the entire year, right? It's like, but then if there's too many deer, like that destroys the environment as well. Like there's ways to live in harmony with the environment. Adam, I know you're vegan, right? But it's like, I know there's ways to live in harmony with the environment while also benefiting from the environment, right? And yeah, man, that's the fight, y'all, I think, is between what we've been programmed and to deprogram ourselves from, this story we've been told about humanity. Yeah, man, I'm raised Irish Catholic, like in Boston.
Here.
The shame, the guilt, and the fear that was imbued in me until to this day, I feel it as well, where I'm still trying to deprogram myself from like, I'm a boy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm very bad, and I'm guilty of something at all times, and I have to confess my sins, and
Yeah.
It's just man, it's the story I was told, right, growing up, and,
Yeah.
it's not true.
No, but if you believe that it is, then you will project that into your experience, and then there'll be a reason for you to go and confess something, again, from a fear-based place, and drop some coins in the box, right? Like, it's all a mechanism of control, always has been. That's why they put a middleman between, us and our creator, which that's insane, because that's like, how that doesn't make any sense. It's just, can argue about that all day long, but it's like, just look closely at it. Doesn't make any sense. And I think it's important to recognize that, like you said, we come here to like learn things, but I would say that's like, it's really like remember things, remember that which we already know. Coming from
Yeah,
the realm of the absolute, where everything is perfect love, but we come here into the realm of the relative. We come here into the experience of duality, where we choose to create up and down, down so we know up, bad or evil so we know good, and loving energy. We get to experience it, but it has to be experienced through duality. We have to experience that which we are not in order to we have to come to know that which we are not in order to fully experience and know that which we are. And that very quickly summarizes our experience here, and understanding that, maybe what we've got going on here collectively, and talking about like the whole human experience, is just it's just gotten a little out of hand. It's gone a little far. We've gone very deep into duality, right? Very deep into distortion and polarity, and it's so far that many of us feel very lost. But as we mentioned before, there's no possibility of being lost, because oneness, we are always one with God. We can only be in the experience of thinking that we're lost, so we can only be in the experience of still finding ourselves. Truly, we can't be lost, because it's like a game we can't lose. And this is why we talk about it's like the only game in town, so I might as well play it, and start focusing on this stuff, because it underpins, it undergirds the entire experience here. Yeah, recognizing that, while it has gotten dark, is all ultimately an expression of love, because it is, our free will. Like, this is a result of our free will choices, and this is why, as we've talked about in the past, with all of this crazy shit, war and child trafficking and addiction and stuff going on this planet, there's no one of us that's not responsible, because we're all one being here, and we are all collectively responsible for this. So understanding that, and recognizing that, like, while we may not consciously be choosing these things, they are as a result of our choices. So that's karma, essentially, cause and effect in this system of karma, taking in the idea of reincarnation, that this could span over, different incarnations, different iterations of our beings, to see, like, well, how has it gotten so bad, and why is it like this? But when we understand that it is a cause and effect situation, that we're all responsible, I personally think that dials down the fear a little bit, and it gives, when we realize that we do have control. Because if we realize that we're not separate, then we can't be victimized, which means we're not we're not in control of this. And recognizing that, truthfully, we are in control. The part where it's sticky there is for people to own up to that, right? It's like, what, Epstein and stuff like that has nothing to do with me. It's like, but yes, it does. Why? Like, as we've discussed before, also referencing a few things from other episodes, the just sort of pedophilic nature of our entire culture. Like, we've discussed certain examples, like body hair and things like that, and, like, the infantilization of women, and objectification of women. All these things, like, we have all taken part in this in our society. We have all, either like okayed it in some way, or at the very least turned a blind eye, right? Whether it's a friend engaging in something unseemly, or everyone turning a blind eye to the creepy uncle, as we've mentioned before. We all have a part to play in, we all had a part to play in creating it, and we all have a part to play in dispelling the darkness. So I personally think that it's an exciting time, and a beautiful time. And I think that I'm able to arrive at that place because I've been looking at it for a long time. When I first started to learn about this stuff, yeah, I had my moments of like, oh my God, maybe we should just be wiped out in another flood, or a meteor strike. Like, I don't know if we can salvage this one, guys, but I don't believe that at all now. Like, I think we have the ability to bring it back, to right this ship.
Absolutely. I think Yeah, you see it in everybody, right? You see it in your day to day. Like you were telling examples, like, there's just anecdotal evidence all around me where most people are good, man. Like most people are willing to help. Like, if
Mm,
I'm,
yeah.
if, like you said, like, a child falls down around me or, or falls into a puddle or something. It's like, first instinct is go help that child. Like you mentioned before we hopped on. It's like most people's first gut reaction is good, right? And even if they have crazy thoughts that come in, it's like, which we all do, right? When you're a child or whatever, and you're like, jump, you know what I mean? When you're at a cliff, and it's like, but like you don't, right?
Yeah,
Like you don't
yeah,
you don't do that because
good
you
example.
yeah, you recognize the consequences and that would lead to the violence of yourself, right? Like the harm of yourself. But it's like you have those involuntary thoughts. But again, we've talked about this in past episodes. It's like which thoughts do you give your votes to, right? Like who's driving the
Mm,
ship on those thoughts? Which thoughts do you act upon? And
yeah,
by and large, most people are just from what I can tell, products of their environments, right? If the environments are crazier and crazier, more traumatized, it's like, yeah, if survive, they're going to do crazier things in order to survive, right?
yeah,
And I can't judge anybody from doing that, right? If you're in a war torn country or a country wrecked by poverty, it's like I can't judge someone who's just trying to eat. But what would happen if all of a sudden, that person, again, we're talking about, hoarding of resources. What if all of a sudden they had access to all the things that they need? It's like, well, then you're out of survival mode for a little bit, and
yeah,
you can progress you have time to think and, time to learn and, progress your consciousness into a different state out of survival mode, right? Out of a traumatized state of being. Not that trauma might not stick with you still, right? It's like, that everyone has that ripple, throughout life and, something might bring it up. But again, to recognize that and to try to move forward. Um,
yeah. Yeah, man. I think, like you said, it's important to mention, like we were talking about before we hopped on, that people are like, as we're discussing, people, we believe our position is that people are inherently good, and those examples cited. Like you see someone fall down. And we see things like the observer effect, where when there's a huge crowd of people and
bystander
someone's
effect. Yeah.
sorry, huge difference. Thanks for catching me.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
different
I'm an
things. Very
observer of
different things.
people all the time, brother, Yeah. But,
Yeah,
yeah,
very different.
bystander
We're not
effect. Yep.
yeah, we're not talking about
Yeah.
quantum physics.
Right.
Yeah, the bystander effect, thank you, Stephen. Yeah,
Yep.
where
Schrodinger's
nobody
bystander.
yeah, no one yeah, no exactly. No one wants to no one wants yeah, just all in a box. No one wants to jump in when someone is in trouble because there's a bunch of other people around and they think that someone else is going to do it, right? So that's definitely a thing, but I don't think that, that's again a product of the overwhelming
Programming.
experience that we have of like, yeah, just like the overpopulation and the saturation of violent images, who like all the trauma. But as we were saying before, ultimately most people are gonna lend a hand. You see an elderly person trip and fall on the sidewalk, like most people are gonna instinctively rush to help. See a kid fall in the river, you're not gonna just let him drown. Like most people are gonna like instinctively move forward to help that person, and that is our true nature. That like I sincerely believe that is our true nature. And when it's not being when we're observing human behavior at its lowest point, as we do all the time, just turn on the news, understanding that's because of the compounding of trauma, like in our current lives as well as intergenerationally. And it's not because we are inherently bad that people are behaving that way. It's because of the just enormous accumulation of trauma that distorts the way we see the world. But truly don't believe that that's the way that it is naturally. I think that when we're programmed to believe that about ourselves, it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we can through the elevation of our awareness get back to this realization that like taking something from someone else is taking it from yourself. And it's just like when we start to include the environment in that as well, right? It's like throwing a piece of garbage in the river. Dropping a piece of garbage in the forest is like the same as smashing yourself in the hand with a hammer. Like when we get to that awareness, then we stop doing those things. Not because it's a moral, not because it's like it's a moral thing, but rather because it's just the most obvious logical thing when we understand that we are all one. Again, like reaching to help that person, that elderly person who's fallen, slipped on an icy sidewalk in the wintertime. It's like that is not like it's not like this noble moral thing to do. It's just like a natural reaction because that person that fell is you. It's just another expression of yourself. And I think that the darkness through we're moving through with the realization of things like the Epstein files and all that, like is the motivator and the precursor to a much larger segment of the population doing that shadow work and moving into that that personal work that will ultimately elevate individually and collectively the awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And, people's rebuttals might be, yeah, something like the bystander effect or look at all the violence or, that there's no way that's true. And, I think my response to that would just be like, because that's what we've chosen, right? Like you
Hmm.
said, like just the compounding trauma and there's been no respite. There's been no solutions. Just now, they used to call it shell shock in World War I, but now it's PTSD. Like it's like we've given language to the human behaviors. Like it's like it's like when a doctor doesn't know a diagnosis of a patient, it's like knowing what we're fighting against is like half the battle
Mm,
because then you can, like form a strategy, get the tools to actually combat what is going on. Because when you just, you're just stumbling around in the dark when you don't know what you're fighting against, right? So it's like to name these things is powerful in and of itself. And so we're just on the precipice of this new psychological start, this psychological war. I don't think it's like boots on the ground this time of like World War I and
mm,
World War II. You see physical violence as well. Like you're seeing missiles flying in the Middle East. And, yes, there is like actual physical violence, but it's so much more psychological, I think, than it is, physical violence. I think the violence is largely, prisoned of the mind, right? It's like they've worked really hard to put us in those mental prisons. As Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. No
yeah,
one but yourself can free your mind, and that rings really true today as well, because I think that's the fight, y'all. That's the fight. And so if you
yeah,
choose to believe, all the things that we were brought up with that I disagree with, like I said, in the religious context, even in school, right? Failures, I was terrified of failure,
yeah,
right? And failure is the best way to learn. Like you learn from failure, and where, they want you to
exactly.
be traumatized from failure, failing a test.
Yeah,
And like failure's a good word,
yeah,
because you learn from the failure, you can tinker and get better. And, with all this, the negativity, it's like, yes, we're choosing that at this moment. But if we finally come to the realization that, what if we were good? What if it could be amazing? Like, I tell
yeah,
that to, friends of mine. And anytime there's like a little negative mindset, mainly around music, like, oh, like, we got to do this thing. It's like, well, what if it could be amazing? Like, what if it could be
yeah,
great? Choose to hope, to dream big. And oh, cheesy cliche, whatever. But it's like, what's the alternative? It's like, do you want to
yeah,
be in this, this dark paradigm? Okay. I strongly disagree with you.
yeah,
I want to create the world that, planting the seeds for the trees that I won't sit under, but maybe, kids or children or, grandchildren will bear the fruits of that labor. Right.
yeah.
And it starts internally, it starts with all of us. Yeah. Trying to choose something better.
Yeah, choosing it consciously because what people don't understand is like locked in this victim mindset of like, oh, it's just like it's so dark out there, it's so negative. People are inherently evil. It's like if we keep believing the rebuttals that you can hear coming. Oh, I don't know, like the evidence is contrary to that. Like, look to the last couple thousand years. It's like, yeah, but when we recognize that the reason that that has been the case is because we have been disempowered for that long, that we have
Uh-huh.
been creating that because we have been choosing it. We have never been victims of any of it. We have been unconsciously creating it. Now we can choose, we can make a conscious choice to flip that script and choose something different. So if somebody wants to stay in that negative mindset, it's like that's a choice. You can choose to flip it. Yeah, and no one's saying it's easy. Like, I mean, I've been doing that in my own personal life. It has been a challenge. It has been some work, but it's worth it because again, it's the only game in town. And if we don't, then we're just going to continue these cycles. I want to believe that humans are inherently evil, and then like the second cultural myth being um, like basically survival of the fittest. So it's like, well, then it makes sense that we're all, trying to trying to just get as much as we can for us and ours, and take from people we perceive to be weaker than us. Then we're gonna continue to create that. Because that is our choice. We have to realize that we have always been empowered. The reason we've been fucked with so hard and manipulated and controlled is because we are so powerful. We had to be tricked into creating our own mess because we're the only ones that can create it. So we had to be manipulated to doing it because this is our reality. We've just been so disempowered. And again, I always come back to like the organized religion stuff, and not only like was disempowering in the messages that it sent, but also in the division, right? Like in the fact that there are different religions, the fact that there are religions at all. Religions don't even make sense because religion is about dogma and doctrine. And it's like that's not about actual lived experience of communion with your creator. It's just about following somebody else's idea about it, which is like that's not it. That's what we've been doing collectively down the generations, is like following other people's ideas about how the world works. You get told like, don't talk to strangers, and people are inherently bad, so watch out because everyone's, out to kind of like take advantage of you. And it's like, while we can understand that, well, first of all, like understanding that that doesn't have to be the case. And that doesn't mean that we move through the world like not being realistic. We understand that we can create something different, but that like also being wise, like we are existing in a paradigm right now where most people do believe that and are therefore living from a fear-based place. And therefore you say, it's like, yeah, you should probably still educate your children on not talking to strangers, but also tell them, it's like explain the deeper principles behind it. Because in that way, we don't just create another fear-based program, another fear-based generation, but we move in this direction of like just recognizing like, guys, that like we're all one. There's really nothing to be afraid of. Death is not real. This idea of separation, we're separate from God, is like it's not real. Never has been. It's just been our beliefs that's created the experience in which it seemed like that's the case.
Yeah. And again, I know, if there's any newer listeners, you're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? And I know these ideas might seem out there, but what I would say, and I think what Adam would also say as well, is that they are humanity has been thinking about these ideas for thousands of years. Again, we talk about religions, right? It's like there's some good stuff like in the books of these religions, right? It's just, again, like Adam's saying, the dogma, the ritual gets in the way of the actual practice of, thou shalt not kill. But then, the Crusades go and kill, a bunch of people in the name of God. Like, you know what I mean? Like, think about it for a second and it makes no sense. What we're trying to say is that, yeah, it's just like Adam was saying, the show is called Oneself, right? Because we believe we're all one, like I might be Adam in a different lifetime. I might be you, dear listener, in another lifetime. So it's like, why would I want to hurt you? Why would I want to do anything that, impacts your life? Because I'm hurting myself, right? In a different lifetime or in a different time. And you're like, that takes a lot of leeway in belief systems, right? Because it's like, well, it's like you have to believe that there's something more than this. You have to believe that, maybe reincarnation is a thing. And you might not believe any of that. But again, what Adam and I would point to is that humanity's been thinking about these ideas, like philosophers and, mystics and, Jesus, right? Like, everyone's heard of Jesus. Like we would consider Jesus like a teacher, right? Someone sent here to like try to elevate the consciousness of humanity. And look how that went, right? He was too soon. He was speaking too much truth too soon, and people didn't like that. But if anything, with these conversations, what I hope is that, yeah, they just make you think. They just make you think a little bit harder about, what we're doing here and what's going on and why things are the way that they are. And also, like Adam said, like, you're so powerful. Again, dear listener, right? Like, you are powerful, right? In your nature and your energy and, the things that you choose. And the powers that be want you to think that you're not. But you
Exactly.
are, right? Especially in your house, your family, your community, like locally. It's like the energy that you bring into those places is powerful, right? If I'm, neither of us have children, but it's like, if I was a dad or something and I, come into my house angry, like I've experienced with my own father, he's coming home from work pissed off or something. It's like, holy shit, that he just shifted the energy of, me, my siblings, and my mom. because he's coming in with an attitude. It's like, you bring that example into anywhere you go, right? You walk into a store with a smile on your face instead of a scowl, like that energy fucking matters. Like that's powerful. You can shift the spaces you enter with just how you are, right? And again, balancing it back to taking it back to the internal, right? To come from that place of joy, from love in your everyday takes a lot of work internally, right? And that's kind of the place to start. But yeah, yeah, everyone has power, right? Everyone has power to shift and change things, and to not subscribe to a lot of the bullshit I would consider,
Yeah, the distortion.
that we were prescribed. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like you said, like if someone doesn't believe or agree with whatever we're talking about or whoever's talking, it's like great. I don't believe that anyone should just take anyone's word for anything. It's like always look to your own experience. So your suggestion there is
Yeah.
great. Yeah, just try something different. Just break the pattern for yourself. Go in and be friendly. Go into the store and be friendlier than you normally would. Try that. Try doing that all day and see how your day shifts. Try things like that. Just break the patterns. Get out of your ego patterning and then see what happens. Look to your own experience for your own truth. It's just like anything when anyone's sharing anything with you, like don't take anything at face value. Don't just agree with someone, even if there's someone you love and respect. See how it feels always. It's not about the messenger. And this is why putting people on pedestals or denigrating others is not good because, like you said, any fool can learn from a master, but only a master can learn from a fool. It's not about the person delivering the message. It's just about the message. So just,
Right.
like a fool can speak some truth every now and then. Getting good at listening to the message, at feeling the message and feeling where it lands with you, right? Like understanding that it's about processing things not only through um your own like mental processes, not only just like your own discernment, but also through your intuition, right? Like, how does it feel? If somebody tells you something and it makes you feel lit up, like you just got lighter, like you got big helium balloons lifting you up, great. If it feels like somebody just gave you a 200-pound backpack to wear, like a friend of mine used to say, like, then go with that feeling. Even if it sounds good to the mind, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But if you feel heavy in your heart when, that message has been shared with you, go with that feeling. And then go out and again, look to your own experience to find your own truth. Because that's another thing too, with all this madness in the world and all of the fake news and, crazy stuff on the internet, which in my opinion, it's just as crazy to fully believe or disbelieve anything on the internet as it is to fully believe or fully disbelieve what we see in like mainstream news outlets. What we have to remember is that we're going to have to develop our powers of intuition, especially like now and in the coming years, because there will just be so much. I mean, there may be so much false information, so much fake news, so much, AI generated nonsense. You won't have any idea based on like the evidence. And again, like there can be evidence for and against everything. You mentioned me being vegan earlier. I saw this thing a little while ago. You can find evidence why being vegan is the best thing ever, and you can also find evidence as why eating meat is the best thing ever. And like there's great arguments for both, right? And what it comes down to is what feels best for you, and being able to understand that your opinion, your feelings are actually super important. That's how we navigate this reality. And no one is any less important than anyone else. Just because someone has more fake numbers in their bank account doesn't make them any more important. Like that's not real power. The real power that we're moving into is the power of our own awareness, seated in the deep awareness that we are actually one with the creator, and death is not a real thing. Death is an illusion. And therefore the fear-based paradigm under which we've been living really kind of loses all its steam when you start to look from that perspective. And once that fear drops away, the perspective gets a little more clear, and you can see the nonsense for what it is. So yeah. Anyway, point being, focus on the intuition. Understand that many opposing truths can exist in the same space at the same time. Just got to define what your truth is personally, and be able to kind of stand with it, and know that it'll
Yeah, man.
change.
For
That's okay.
right. Yeah, yeah. We're not, stagnant linear beings.
Mm.
what when you say death is an illusion too, could you just maybe give a little bit more context for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's like a for someone who's not on board with that kind of stuff, like, I guess that can be a bold statement, right? Because it's like, what do you mean? Like, we're talking about death of the physical body, just understanding that, I mean, yeah, going back to thermodynamics or just physics, right? Like energy never dies, it only changes form. And what we are is energy, what we are is consciousness. Consciousness, energy is the same thing. These physical expressions that we see age and pass away doesn't mean the death of the being. It's like life can't be created or destroyed. Thinking outside of time here, right? Like outside of the linear experience of time, and yeah, world without end sort of thing. Understanding that,
Yeah,
yeah, the journey of the soul. Like we take on. I mean, as far as I can see, reincarnation is a fact. That eternity is eternity, and that we're here as little facets of God experiencing itself through the illusion of separation in order to have that duality, in order to have something to look back upon, in order to experience itself. And that's as far as I can see, like what we're doing here. Yeah, the death of the physical body is not something to be feared. It's not, it's just the opening of another door. It's like this, it's essentially the same vibration, the same energy as birth. So birth, you're coming in the door, and death, you're leaving and going through a different one. Some esoteric ideas there, but only esoteric because not many people have paid attention to them, relatively speaking. Obviously, many throughout the ages. Talking about the general population now on the planet, not that many, but understanding that also that has to come through personal experience. And for me, that awareness started to foster that awareness at a young age, and I've had multiple experiences now personally that have confirmed that to me. So I speak on that from like a place of confidence now. But if people say like, yeah, prove that, or they don't understand it, it's like, it's just something, once you start to focus your energy in that direction and begin to look, then it begins to open up, and those experiences will come through.
I think that, again, anyone new to these concepts, which I get can sound out there. Yeah, I'm on board with you.
Yeah.
Hopefully others are as well.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts on episode 33 of humans just not being inherently evil, right? Like, we're good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like that can sound just as crazy as, to some people, that could sound just as crazy as there is no death, right? But understanding, like, maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need some crazy thinking in order to break the pattern that we've been in for so long. Because again, if we're saying, oh, well, look to history, look, like this has been proving itself over and over through the generations, like humans are behaving this way. It's like, yeah, but that's because we've been choosing it for that long. We just have to empower ourselves to realize that we can make a different choice, and recognize that, like, if that sounds crazy, it's only because it's relatively so. Just because that, like, everything is that just because we look at human behavior as like that's normal human behavior, it doesn't mean that it's natural, right? And it's just like my favorite Krishnamurti quote that we always come back to. Um, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society, and understanding that we have a profoundly sick society, and it's just sick. It's not that it's not that that's how we are inherently. We're just a little sick, right? It's just like we have this mental illness that we have to, like, accumulate lots of money and keep it away from other people. We have this mental illness that we think, individually and collectively, that we're afraid of each other, that we're afraid of ourselves, that we're afraid of God. And but none of it is real. If it sounds crazy and a little out there, then, like, I mean, I think that's a good thing. In the path that we've been walking, that's a good thing.
I'd rather that crazy than the crazy that we've been doing.
Exactly. If you want to stick with the status quo, I mean, like, you got to take a look in the mirror and really sit down and think about what your priorities are, because, we're trashing our planet, we're trashing each other. And it's not just in faraway lands, where, we're comfortably sitting in North America talking about things going on in the Middle East. There's like horrible things happening right at home. There, violence, and there's within people's homes.
Absolutely.
We have placed one half of the species above the other, right? Like, patriarchy, like that's fucking insane. That's sick. And, like, this is, it's everywhere. It's like nothing works. Everyone's addicted. People think they're not addicted, but most people are addicted to at least 3 to 5 different substances,
Yeah.
and, you
Caffeine,
know,
vape, phones, yeah,
alcohol, yeah, there's screens, porn, the
porn,
porn
yeah,
epidemic with men, it's like people are addicted sugar, we're not supposed
sugar,
to be getting this sick. We're not supposed to be getting that sick, right? Like, it shouldn't be that, like, this, crazy level of addiction that we deal with and consider normal. Because again, it might be normal just because everyone else is experiencing that, but that doesn't make it natural. So, yeah, it just if it sounds crazy and it's like, yeah, if that again, if that makes me crazy, then, like, yeah, I guess sign me up. Like, send me my card in the mail. Like, I'll own that because I don't wanna be well adjusted to a sick society. I'd rather
a
be
sick
one of the
society.
weird I'd wanna rather be the weird one,
Yeah,
you know?
brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, if you like what you heard on Oneself, hopefully, if anything made you think, I think that's kind of our goal is, just make you think about stuff and, reevaluate what's going on, maybe from a positive perspective. I know it's doom and gloom out there, but maybe, maybe you can see the positive within the darkness, the light within the darkness. And so yeah, if you want to support us, please do so in any of the ways that are free. Like, comment, subscribe, share, draw attention to this thing. That really helps us out a lot. And then, yeah, we'll catch you next week.
See ya.